All right, here's a question. What would you do with an extra hour every day? It's not a trick question. That's what a bunch of physical therapists are saying after switching to Empower EMR by MW Therapy. It's built on automation and AI. So basically, it becomes your clinic's co-pilot. It keeps your schedule full, handles billing like a pro, and cuts way down on paperwork headaches. But here's the kicker. It's not some generic system. It's made for physical therapists by people who know what you deal with day in and day out. You want more patients? Done. Easier documentation? Done. Less stress? Yes, please. Empower lets you be the hero of your clinic with happier patients, less burnout, and better profits. Book your demo today at mwtherapy.com and see why switching just might be the easiest win of your year.
And he says, I went into a spiral for 2 years. I didn't know who I was, what I wanted to do. He said it was just brutal. So he said, so now I learned that my identity shouldn't be a Navy SEAL. It should be something like I give back to my community, or I'm kind, or I help others, or something that no matter what happens, no one can ever take that away from me.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really amazing advice.
Yeah. You've heard the saying, great leaders aren't born, they're made. But what actually makes a great leader? And more importantly, what have some of the best leaders learned along the way? For more than 8 years, Steve Anderson has been on a mission to find that out. As the host of Profiles in Leadership, Steve has sat down with over 200 guests, from CEOs to changemakers, to uncover the habits, insights, and defining moments that shape truly impactful leaders. But today, the tables have turned. In this episode, Steve joins us to share 10 of the most powerful leadership lessons he's learned from his time behind the mic. From game-changing mindset shifts to the kind of advice that sticks with you for life. Steve delivers some absolute gems that you don't want to miss. So, what does it really take to lead? Let's find out. My conversation with Steve Anderson starts now on PT Pintcast. Steve Anderson, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you. It's been a while. I think it was during the pandemic we did one. So
yeah, and it's always fun to talk to other podcasters. In the beginning, it felt weird, right? It felt like self-aggrandizing, like podcast. It's obviously just like a crossover episode. Remember back in the 80s? They would do like character crossovers, like the Fonz would show up on some other show that didn't make any sense, but they'd cross over.
There you go.
And now I feel like people get it, and it's like this Venn diagram where people might have never heard of my show, and now they listen to yours, and vice versa, and it sort of works.
Yeah, it does. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So give people the 30,000 foot view if they haven't tuned in since the throes of COVID. You were the leader of I guess a decently large organization up in the Pacific Northwest. You had a couple clinics up there, and then you've done other things in terms of coaching and things like that with your insights. So what do you, when you're at a cocktail party and someone says, hey, what do you do, Steve? How do you answer?
Well, I'll start from the current and go backwards. So what I do now is I'm semi-retired, but I do executive coaching. So I work with high-level executives, some in the physical therapy world, but not all. And so I do that coaching, and then I have my podcast on the side. And the podcast is called Profiles in Leadership. I'm going on 8 years now, which seems like a long time.
Crazy.
I've interviewed over 35 people, and which has, been very interesting, learned a ton. And then before that, what you're referring to, I was the CEO of Therapeutic Associates, which is a private practice physical therapy company in the Pacific Northwest, which I believe is still the largest privately owned private practice in the nation. I think they're up to about 110 or more clinics now. And it was a great experience. I was a CEO there for 19 years. And so I'm a PT, obviously, and started out in a clinic as a staff PT, became a clinic director, and then eventually was elected to the CEO of the company and did that for 19 years.
Well, so obviously that experience for 19 years sort of qualifies you to give executive leadership advice to people, which is, probably not easy to come by, right? There's not many people who've done something like that for 19 years who are now also saying to someone who either wants to do it or who is doing it, wants to do it better. Not a whole lot of people who do what you do, I imagine.
Well, it's interesting you say that because there's a million business coaches now and leadership
Sure.
coaches and whatever. But it is. I always do scratch my head sometimes when I see, a business coach. This has never run a business.
A little
So
odd.
it's kind of interesting.
A little
So
odd.
I do hope that it gives me some insight, experience, and knowledge. Boots on the ground type of thing that I think is valuable. And you can read the books and hear the speeches and all that, but experience, I'm not sure you can buy. So that's just something that you either have or you don't.
Yeah, you've been there, done that, fallen into a trap, figured out how not to fall in that trap, and that's what you buy with insight is that
Yeah,
person has seen and done. Even if it was 25 years ago, the I imagine things like AI. Well, that how does Steve
yeah,
understand AI? But you're saying,
yeah.
okay, there's a new thing that's come on. How is my business going to react to it? It doesn't matter if it's AI or something different. I imagine the thought processes, at least, maybe not these steps, but the thought processes are probably pretty similar.
Yeah, yeah, and two thing, another thing that people pay me for, and they don't probably realize it when they hire me, and sometimes don't even realize it when I'm working with them. But I feel like I have experience, so I know a lot. But what you're also paying for is I know a lot of people, so I can say, hey, I don't, maybe I'm not on the cutting edge of AI other than what we all know. So here's a guy that I know that I've talked to, and then I can make that connection and make that introduction.
Right. It's
So,
when people watch Shark Tank and they go, well, yeah, of course they're getting money from Cuban. That's valuable. I go, yeah, but they also now get a warm introduction. They know now they know what Cuban knows and they get to be
right.
introduced to people Cuban knows. And instead of you having to Google how to solve this problem, Cuban's like, I own a company that solves that problem. I'll get you a good rate and I'll introduce you to the manager. So it really is, your network is your net worth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure people appreciate that till they experience it. So, yeah.
Right. All right. So I've done a little bit of media consulting, and I'm going to say a statement, and you tell me if you think it's true or not.
Okay.
I went into doing some media consulting with PT organizations, and I thought it was going to be 90% communications and 10% psychology. And what it wound up being was 90% psychology and 10% media. Is that
Yeah.
similar?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean,
Wild.
I focus pretty. I have a niche, which is leadership training or development. So it's like helping the person I'm working with become a better leader, helping them work with their executive teams to communicate better, working with how to grow more leaders within their organization. And that's all that's all, as you say, psychology, communication, human
Yeah.
nature, understanding personalities, understanding what resonates and what doesn't, and that type of thing. So yeah, that's kind of my niche, and yeah, I love doing that.
And what you didn't include in your resume in the big picture is every once in a while you get a call from Jimmy McKay who goes, "What am I supposed to do with my life, Steve?" And then you give me advice and you send me off in a better direction. So
Well,
thank you for that.
yeah, and sometimes I have ideas, and sometimes I'll refer you to somebody who I think will have a better idea. So yeah, exactly.
All right, so you mentioned doing profiles in leadership for a long time. I think I
Yeah,
saw you post something on LinkedIn a week or two ago, and I thought, man, you've been doing something so narrow in leadership and having conversations that if you're looking for that, that's the spot. Like you're the guy who's like,
yeah,
I just do this, but I go an inch wide, but I go a mile deep. And I
yeah,
just sat there thinking, man, if I forced Steve, if I put his feet to the fire and said, you got to give me 10 of your best pieces of information, and he gave it to me. Wow, what a treasure chest of info that would be. And I think I DM'd you or texted you, and you're like, yeah, sure, let's
yeah,
do that.
yeah.
So man, what was the process in sitting down and looking back over 200 and something episodes and even finding that
Yeah.
stuff?
Well, that was a real chore or challenge, let's say,
Sure.
because when people ask me, why do I do this podcast? What's the motivation, behind it? And I honestly say every time, because I learn something every time I do it. Every time I do an interview, I learn something new, and I didn't know that, or that's so interesting. And I'm a curious person to begin with. So so I started going back and looking, and it's like that I knew here I could have had maybe 250, impactful insights, but I tried to narrow it down to 10. Obviously, didn't have the time or the bandwidth to re-listen to every single one of them.
Sure, sure.
But the ones that I do remember that stuck in my brain, yeah, I wrote down some ideas, and so yeah, I'd be happy to share them with you.
All right, hit us with number one. And if someone's being left off the list, doesn't mean Steve doesn't like you, of course, because people have asked me my favorite episodes, and I'm like, I'm not going down that road because I feel like
Yeah,
I'd leave people off. And just so you know, you can find profiles in leadership like wherever podcasts are heard to get the raw insights. So what's number
exactly.
10 or number one? Are we going 10 to 1
Well,
or 1 to
so
10?
I've got 10 here, but I'm not going to rank them in order of
Good.
what the most significant. Okay.
Smart
So
man.
here we go. So the one that I had recently was Nancy Phillips, who is a founder and CEO of Rally Day Partners. Okay. So that's a private equity firm that is actually working with one of our colleagues we know well and love her so much,
Yep.
Michelle Colley. And so I was trying to push her like, okay, you're saying all the right things. I get it, whatever. But when it really comes down to it, isn't it all about making money and getting the best return on your investment? And she made this statement that I thought was profound. She said, look, Steve, you can't get a good return on your investment unless you focus on culture and leadership development within your organization. And as I told her, that's speaking my language because I've been promoting that for years and years and years and years that, you got to focus on the people and the culture and the leadership development and things like that. Then your profits and your success will come where, I think sometimes people get so focused on the numbers and that they forget about that kind of stuff, and that's why people feel pushed and burned out and not part of the organization decision making process and so on. So coming from her, who's in that world, I thought that was very profound, and I thought, wow, if they all felt and talked like that, they'd probably
Sure.
be in a better spot.
And private equity is something that I haven't really been involved with a lot, but these are people who come into an organization, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I'll give you my B
Okay,
minus version. They come into an organization and they look at what's there, the culture, the people, the land, like what do they do, how do they do it, and who is involved in doing it now. And then
right.
they say, could our expertise and our funding make this thing go better? Could we be an element that we add so that that organization and our private equity organization both benefit from that? How'd I do?
Yeah, no, that's fine. And often what they do then is then they say, okay, so we're going to be in this business for say 3 to 5 years. And then we're going to do the next thing, either find some other private equity company to buy this or maybe sell it to somebody
Oh,
else. So that's how they make their money. So
understood.
it's often that they would come in and say, okay, we need to be more productive. We need to cut expenses. We need to do this. Yet a lot of times they sell because we have more money, we have more resources to provide to your company. So I will say that over my experience, the private equity is changing its tune a bit, and I think they're getting better in the physical therapy market than they used to be. But there's still that pressure like, okay, how do I get my maximum return out of this in 3 to 5 years? Well,
Sure.
if you're a numbers data guru guy, you're going to say, make people more productive, treat more patients,
Cut
and
expenses.
cut expenses. That's how I make my money. Well, as we know, most PTs we know don't do well with that.
Right.
Okay. So to me, what Nancy's saying is no, what we need to do is invest in the people and the culture and get them excited about things. Therefore, they will become more efficient and more productive because they love what they're doing. That's how we get our return.
Yeah. Take care
So
of the big thing. Take care of
I
the big
was
thing in culture and people.
exactly. So I was thrilled to hear that.
Love that. All right. So that was
Yeah.
that was actually the one. That was the one you shared on LinkedIn
Yeah.
that I just thought, man, if that's good advice, what are the other, 200 plus episodes? What's next on
Yeah.
it?
Well, the next one is I like to try and get some really the theme is leadership, but I can see leadership in so many different aspects of our life.
Okay.
So this next one is a woman by the name of Mary Gaucher, and she is a singer-songwriter from Nashville, Tennessee. And I saw her at a TEDx event in New York once, and there's just something about her that I thought this woman is amazing. So I DM'd her on Instagram, and believe it or not, she answered me. And so here she is, and what she kind of does is her, to give back to the community, so to speak, is she sits down with wounded warriors from the military, and they're having trouble with PTSD or whatever. Sometimes they have these horrible things they're dealing with, and then she spends a weekend with them at a songwriting workshop,
Huh.
and they write a song together about their story, and then she plays it and often records it, and when they do that, it just gives voice to what they went through, and it's just very profound. But anyway, she's an amazing artist in person. And so her quote, we were talking about imposter syndrome,
Mm.
and she says, even in music too, we have imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not that good, or people are going to think, gosh, do they like this? Do they not like that? They're going to think, whatever. So they have it as well. That we talk about all the time in the business world. And she said about imposter syndrome, she said, it's just an ego problem. She goes, I'm just trying to be, to be of service and connect with people. I don't think ranking people by value is a healthy way to look at the world. So she just says, man, I'm going to connect with this person. I'm going to provide a service that I can maybe do for them. And between those two things, if I do that, then I'm good. I don't have to get 7 million followers, or I don't have to do this or that. I connected with a person. I made a difference. That's what it's all about. So,
Ironically, if you want 7 million followers, doing what she does is the way to actually get there.
yeah,
Focus on one person at a time,
yeah.
share one good minute with 7 million people. That's how you get 7 million people to buy in.
And it's not that different than what we just talked about, what Nancy
Correct.
Phillips said,
Correct.
because you're focusing on that one person doing that one thing, and that translates to bigger numbers. So, yeah.
And what was her name again?
Her name is Mary Gaucher, and it's spelled, I think she's from Louisiana, probably Cajun country. It's Gauthier. Somehow that spells Gaucher.
All right.
So,
I like that.
yeah.
Sliding into the DMs, as the kids call it on
Yeah,
Instagram.
yeah.
And
So I mean, that it's one thing I've always said is I've never been afraid to ask the question. So sometimes you just reach out and you get some people that will respond, and so
yep.
it's awesome.
I tell people all the time. The great Terry Gross, who's an interviewer on NPR, her biography was called "All I Did Was Ask."
Yeah,
That's
it's
it.
true. You
Sometimes
do.
that's hard.
It is hard. It is hard.
All right. What's next on the
Okay.
list? You led off with two good ones.
Yeah, number three, Rich Devaney, who is a Navy SEAL.
Okay.
And Rich not only became a Navy SEAL, but he also then became a trainer of Navy SEALs. And so he was telling me about the process. And, they have this in Navy SEAL training, they have this thing called the Buds Week or whatever it is, which is they do all these horrific endurance things that don't make any sense, but you just have to keep doing them. And the dropout rate on that is 80%. So 80% of the guys that get to Buds don't make it.
And getting there isn't easy either. So
And
it's not
getting
like,
there is not
you
easy
know,
either. So he said that I said, well, who makes it? Who becomes a Navy SEAL? And his answer, I thought, was perfect. He said, I can always tell when someone's going to make it when they make the step between worrying about their own suffering and worrying about the guy beside him and helping them get through their suffering. When a guy makes that step, that's the guy that'll make it.
says
And
a lot.
again, I mean, take that to business. As soon as you start being a team member that helps others and helps them rise and helps them become better at their job and whatever, you both rise. You both get better. And I think that was profound because he says at the beginning of the Buds training, all people can worry about is how bad me is suffering. But when I start helping other people, I make the jump. So I thought that was profound.
That is, I mean, I've seen videos and documentaries on that training, and it is even the stuff that I imagine there's some stuff we don't see, but the stuff that you see is pretty horrific. But
Yeah.
they've said it before. They're testing your mind. Yes, it is a ridiculous endurance and strength test. But what they're
Yeah.
really trying to see you do is how do you work with others? What are you focused on? If you're focused on you, when we get out there in a real situation, you're going to be focused on you. We don't want those guys. We want the
Yeah.
people who are focused on we.
Exactly. 100%.
All right, what's up
So,
next?
somewhat related, interviewed a guy by the name of Walter Bond. Probably never heard of him.
Nope.
Walter Bond was a Division I basketball player for the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
He played all 4 years in college, never started a game. He was the sixth man coming in off the bench. And his coach would always tell him, when I look at my players, you're not one of the five best players, so I don't start you. But whenever you're in the game, we're better. So he usually would go in early and play a lot of the game. And so amazingly enough, now think of the NBA. There's only 455, I think, players in the world that play in the NBA at any one time. So you know that all those guys have come from being the best player on their team by a mile. That's who makes the NBA. Well, somehow some coach hears and knows about Walter Bond. So he drafts him or chooses him to come into the NBA as the sixth man off a University of Minnesota basketball team that wasn't necessarily, the national champion or anything. Walter Bond played 8 years in the NBA. And I said, well, what did you do? I mean, what was the difference? And he said, again, what I think, I learned, he said, well, when I'd come into the game, what most players do, they come into the game and they say, okay, this is what I do. I'm a great 3-point shooter, so I'm going to make 3-pointers. Or I'm a great rebounder, so I'm going to go get the rebounds. Or I'm a good defensive player, so I'm going to play defense. And he goes, I go into the game and I'm sitting on the bench watching. I go, what do we need right now? What does the team need me to do so that we're better? Sometimes I need to rebound. Sometimes I do need to shoot a 3-pointer. Sometimes I need to play really tough defense on the guy that's killing us. He goes, so that was my approach to every job, which again, it's not about him, it's about the team. So what can I do to help the team? And again, fantastic story. And 8 years in the NBA, having never started a game in his college career.
You know that end of day feeling when your brain's toast and you still have a mountain of notes to finish? Yeah, not anymore. Athelis AI Scribe is the ultimate clinic weapon. It listens in your real time during patient visits and automatically writes your notes. That means less time at the computer and way more time for your actual life. Whether that's seeing more patients, grabbing lunch on time, or just getting home before dark. No typing and no more late night charting. It's a dream. Seriously, this is the scribe you've been waiting for. Go check out a live demo at athelis.com and see how much time you can get back. That's ATHELAS.com. Yeah, he doesn't think about me. He thinks about we. And it goes back to what you said that his coach said about him. When I look at you, you're not one of my best five, but when you're in the game, we play better. It's because he tailors his game and where he's going to put his effort on what's needed now.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course the team's going to get better. We need this now, so I'm going to do that.
And sometimes, you see good leaders do that too. Like sometimes, they don't lead from the highest level. They might roll up their sleeves and help dig a ditch, or something if that's what's needed, So it's just somebody who's able to see what is needed at the time, and that's what I do.
That's smart. Yeah. See, I always like when I look at your show, it's not always the same guest. You just talked to me about PE and Navy SEALs and basketball players and musical artists. Leadership isn't about just being in a boardroom.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And that's why I try to look at all aspects. The next one on the list is Gabby Reese.
Oh yeah.
So, Gabby Reese, for those who don't know, is a professional volleyball player and a model and, very successful. And what I asked her a question, I don't remember exactly how I said it, but basically People magazine in the 1990s, somewhere in the mid 1990s, said that she was one of the 10 most beautiful women in the world. Now, she's a professional athlete, and they made that statement as well. So my question more was like, how at a young age do you deal with that? I mean,
Right.
Holy cow, that's and she said, she goes, as I've gotten older, I've learned that people may thank you or for this or that, or sometimes it can be very flattering, but I just focus on holding the line for myself to live up to. And realizing what other people think is their issue, not mine.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, so People magazine is going to find somebody next week, the next pretty face and whatever. And if I focus on that and I just think I'm all that, it's just, like it's a roller coaster. So I thought that was pretty profound at her young age that she was able to think that. And then now she's lived that her whole life. And, she's doing great things. And she's not a model right now and she's not a professional athlete, but she's still doing great things.
Yeah, this reminds me of, do you know who have you heard of Mel Robbins?
Oh yeah, love
She's got that
Mel.
let them theory. It almost sounds like Gabby Reese understood that a long
Yeah,
time ago, which is whatever you're going to think, I'm flattered, thank you. But if I put too much stock and too much stake into that of you hyping me up, when you stop, I'm going to crash. So don't
yeah,
do either. Just let them.
yeah. I got a funny story on Mel Robbins.
Yeah.
She was a keynote speaker at the PPS one year.
I didn't know that.
And yeah, and so I was in the back of the room, and I wasn't president at the time. I think it's after I was the president, and so I know a lot of people at that conference, right? And I see this, woman, like in a flowing skirt and high top red tennis shoes, and she's kind of pacing back and forth in the back of the room. And my first thought, well, who is that? And then my second thought was, I like her style. She just seems like she's got something going. And then the person says, and our keynote speaker today is Mel Robbins. She goes running down the main aisle, gets up on the deck, and that's who it was. So I thought, yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, the reason that comes to mind is I just started reading her book
Yeah,
just a couple days ago. But it really
yeah,
is like, if you look at her book and what Gabby said, it's not rocket science. It's also one of the hardest things to do. But when you figure it out, as Mel says in her book, and it sounds like Gabby understood, you take your own power back when you stop either blaming other people for how they made you feel, or just owning how I feel should be how I feel, or my perception should be my
yeah.
reality.
And sometimes we look at false accolades, like for me and you. Sometimes you get a little caught up, like, what are my downloads? What are my downloads?
Totally.
And I'm like, and my wife is great because she always says, well, do you care? And I go, what do you mean? And she goes, well, if you had 10 times as many downloads, would it make any difference what you're doing? And I go, no. And she goes, well, why do you do what you do? And I go, because I love it and I learn something every time. She goes, then forget about the
Yep.
downloads. It doesn't really matter,
I did some
and
I did
yeah,
some I did some media training the other day. Someone found me through LinkedIn and asked to talk to me, and she's trying to become a media writer. And she said, "What do I need to do?" And I took someone else's quote was, "If you want to be a better writer, you don't need more readers. You need to write more. If you want to be
yeah,
a better podcaster, you don't need more listeners. You need to podcast more."
yeah.
And I don't think she liked I don't think she liked my advice, because I said, listen, do you want to know why I've been successful? I showed up twice a week, every week for 10 years. And it was easier for me to show up because I really just liked doing it. I'm like, I'm very
Yeah,
sorry, but how come you haven't written? And she's like, well, I'm waiting. And da-da-da. I said, nope,
yeah,
can't do
yeah.
that. Can't wait.
No, no, that's it reminds me too of I'm a guitar player, so if you have an acoustic guitar, a lot of people say, "God, your guitar sounds so good. How can my guitar sound better?" Well, if you know anything about the wood in an acoustic guitar, it vibrates and it expands and it has a life. So the answer is just what you said. You want to make your guitar sound better, play it more often
Play it
because
more.
that's what the wood wants to do. It gets warmer the more you play it. So I
Yep.
think that's interesting.
All right. Where are we at
All
now?
right.
What is it, 5?
Okay, so we're going to go to another Navy SEAL. This guy's name is Earl Dobler, and he gave what I think is really profound advice. He said, whatever you do, make sure that your identity is something that no one can take away from you.
Okay.
And I said, okay, explain that further. He
Yeah.
says, okay, for instance, he said, ever since I was a teenager, all I wanted to be was a Navy SEAL. Everything I did was to prepare for a Navy SEAL. I go to the training, I make it through BUDS, I get selected, I'm a Navy SEAL. I'm doing all I ever wanted to do in my life. And then I got injured
Mm.
and I couldn't be a Navy SEAL anymore. And he says, I went into a spiral for 2 years. I didn't know who I was, what I wanted to do. He said, it was just brutal. So he said, so now I learned that my identity shouldn't be a Navy SEAL. It should be something like I give back to my community, or I'm kind, or I help others, or something that no matter what happens, no one can ever take that away from me.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really amazing advice.
Yeah. Yeah, take apart the elements of what a Navy SEAL is. It's someone who shows up, cares about his team over himself. You can do that lots of different places. So if you can't be the Navy SEAL, you can still be that person who shows up early and goes to the nth degree and cares about the team. You can plug that in lots of different places.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great
Absolutely.
advice. I like that one.
So here's another one. So Brad Zimmerman, just a leadership coach and been around a long time, and he wrote this book. And And there was a story in it that really caught my attention. So if it's okay with you, it comes off better if I just read it.
Yeah, yeah.
So listen to this and see what you think. So in his book, he says, tells a story. An old Cherokee is teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside me, he said to the boy. It's a terrible fight. It's between two wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self pity, guilt, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other one is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside of you and inside of every other person, too. The grandson thought about it for a minute. Then he asked his grandfather, which wolf will win? The old Cherokee simply replied, the one you feed. Isn't that awesome?
It's just it's a great way to look at it. It doesn't say that there aren't bad ideas or bad thoughts in you and that would make you bad. It says there is,
Yeah.
but you can decide which one will win by which
Yeah.
one you feed.
Yeah. Where you spend your most time is what's going to happen,
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where easier said than done
Yeah.
often, but I do think that it's a mindset. It's the Carol Dweck mindset theory that, what you focus on and what you think and how you think makes a difference on what you do.
Yeah, there's some people
So,
that say it sounds real new agey and self-helpy, but when you really start practicing it, there are people that say like, don't speak negatively about yourself, even in your own head. Make sure that you're only feeding that other wolf, like even in your
yeah,
own thoughts, because that's where it
yeah,
starts. Because what you
yeah,
start thinking, you start becoming.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a good one.
So, are we still going? Another
Yeah,
one?
absolutely.
Okay. Daniel Pink, who
Oh
I
yeah.
did a long time ago. And so there were a lot of good ones out of that one, but one that I thought was interesting is he said, great leaders are incredibly generous with their teammates. He said they are not dictatorial leaders. They provide vision, provide direct feedback in the moment, not at performance reviews, but at the moment, and connect with them in a very deep level, not afraid to use the word love when having discussions with them, to show that empathy and that caring and whatever. And he says that, and then just genuinely ask their opinion and listen. Again, not anything we haven't heard before, but I think it's true. And then we went into a real deep discussion too about what I felt for a long time is that a lot of CEOs of companies often come up through the finance side of things. And in the finance world, there's a lot more left brain thinkers than right brain thinkers. And, left brain is more data, analytics, numbers, spreadsheets, whatever. And the right side of the brain is kind of what he just described there. And so we had a lot of talk, and he thinks that as companies move forward and as we evolve in business in the world, that there's going to be a lot more right brain leaders in our future than in the past. So I think the right brain leader is getting a lot of traction in the sense of these are the leaders our companies want because they help us discover purpose. They help us work together as a team. They help us give back, to our communities, and it's not all about the numbers and the spreadsheets. So.
Yeah, yeah. We dealt with this a lot in radio. There were very much left brain, right brain, programming versus sales. It was always that programming versus sales. It was like, hey,
Yeah,
what should lead? Should the creative people lead, and the logical left brain people figure out how to make it happen? Right? I set the vision, figure out how to pay for it, man, because that's where we're here. I'm going to set course.
yeah,
You set the sales, and I think we had the most success for me anyway in my radio career is when I realized it wasn't left versus right. It was how do we figure out how do we get the most, almost back to your baseball analogy, or sorry, basketball, six man. How do we get the most out of both? What do we need right
yeah,
now from each side? And how can we apply that right now? It
yeah.
shouldn't be all or none. It shouldn't be this or that forever. It's what's needed now.
And that is exactly true what you said, and I think Daniel Pink said this in the interview too, is that the best leader is one who can do both.
Yeah.
Because you don't want somebody who's so far right brain that they don't even look at the numbers, and then probably get in trouble.
Sure.
So it's somewhere in the middle, and a good leader is someone who can access both sides of their brains when they need it. So,
And know when to do which. That's the
yeah,
hard. Like, isn't that the hard part? It's like, well, when do I do that? It's like, well, you got to figure it
yeah,
out. You got to feel it. You got to see it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's not a small guess there. Okay. Daniel
Okay.
Pink.
Another one, Vivian James Rigney.
Okay.
So this is a guy who I think he's from Ireland originally, and he was one of these guys that was everything was accomplished achievement. I got to do these things. So he set out in his life to climb the 7 summits, which is the
Oh yeah,
highest
yeah.
summit on each continent. And so he got to this point where he was at the top of Everest. The weather turned. It was miserable. He was only 600 feet from the summit. He couldn't see where he was going. His body hurt terribly, and he actually said, "I went into a space where I don't think I'm going to make it out. I don't think I'm going to get there." And so then he said he started thinking, and he says, "Let me just read it here. What will people remember me for? All these amazing accomplishments I've done? Or will they remember me on how I made them feel and how I helped them improve their life?" Again, we're talking about a common theme here, right? Other people said that in different ways. But he said he had that thought, and he said it's obvious that the latter was more important. And just then, the Sherpa came and grabbed him by his goggles and said, "Follow me." And he said at the time that he thought, "Oh, thank God, he's going to take me to the bottom." And the Sherpa, so he followed him, not even knowing which direction he was going. The Sherpa took him up to the top, to the summit. He summited, and then he said, "Follow me," and the Sherpa got him back down.
Wow.
But it was just a really profound story that all of a sudden it was like, oh, my whole life was focused on doing these 7 summits and saying how great I am to do that, and it's not really the answer.
Yeah, there's so many lessons in climbing a mountain, right? I mean, I climbed a couple mountains, and I heard a great quote. I think it was in a book I was reading before I climbed my first mountain. Just a spoiler, it was not Everest. And someone said, do you climb the mountain so the world can see you, or do you climb the mountain so you can see the world?
Yeah,
And it was like, it goes back to, is it about me or is it about we? And if you
yeah,
do it for that second one, the we reason, things get a little better. Maybe not at first, right? Let's say you were working with a team and you were going to
yeah,
split up commissions, or you could keep all the commission. Well, keeping that commission is going to make you feel good and feel rich. But if you spread it out 5 years from now, you might have 10 or 100 times that. But it's
yeah.
simple to say, but it is not easy to do.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I mean, it's all these things that I've brought up with you all kind of have a common theme, which is it's not about me. It's about the team, or it's about the group. And then my final one here that I wrote down of my 10 that you had talked to me about was Jan Jensen, who is the head coach of the Iowa women's basketball program. And you've had, the success they've had and what they've done, and her quote that I thought was amazing, in that she says, "My goal is not to win at any cost. Although winning is great, it is developing amazing women doing their time in the program to prepare, then to serve in the greater bit of life after basketball." I've heard Coach K say a very similar thing, which is, you know what, I'm here to help people develop and become better and prepare them for life, not to just win a basketball. And again, looking at the big picture and looking at what I can do to help others that really make a difference. So again, I could have pulled a quote or multiple quotes out of all those interviews, but those are kind of the 10 that came to mind. So
Yeah. Well, on my show, I do a thing called the parting shot.
yeah,
And did I ever tell you why I did that? Why I
no,
started doing that? So I was talking to people. I started this podcast when I was a student, second year PT student. And I did it because I just want to learn stuff and realized with my radio background, I learned best like this. And this is back when
yeah,
you had to explain to people, like when you started your show, we had to explain to people first what a podcast was and how they could get,
right,
why they should listen to it. Now I think it's a little more mainstream. But what I realized was I was talking to all these people I looked up to clinical leaders, professors, leaders in business, things I wanted to learn. And I didn't know how to wrap up the conversation without cutting them off. So I
Yeah.
stole an idea from P.T. Barnum, who used to have, the Barnum and Bailey Circus, the Big Top. They used to have the sideshow where you'd go in, you'd pay a nickel, and you could go see the bearded lady and the sword swallower, and you could just sort of walk around the tent. And his problem was when people paid their nickel, they wanted to spend all day there, but he had to get people out. So he put up a sign that said, an arrow on a sign that said, see the egress around the corner. So people would get to the end and see the egress and they'd walk through it. And egress, of course, is exit. So he changed the speed, the meaning to make people enticed about the exit. But I did parting shot because I wanted to sort of say, hey, listen, that was great. Let's wrap it up. But give me one overarching idea or sentiment, because we know when people at the end, they'll pay attention. You've got their attention. What would you want your parting shot to be? What's something that maybe was a common theme amongst all these 10 ideas that you shared with us today from your 200 episodes of Profiles in Leadership?
Gosh, parting shot. I would just say that people are amazing, but they are more amazing and accomplish greater things when they focus on helping others reach their goals. So like one of my mantras has always been, what do I do? And I always say, I help leaders grow. And so, if it gives me the greatest amount of joy if I can see other leaders start from, here and get to there, and that just warms my heart, probably even more so than seeing what I've been able to do. So I think that if you can just focus on all these things we talked about today, kind of relate to that same thing. And one other thing I might say is, copying somebody is the greatest form of flattery, right? So you were ahead of me, so I copied you too. So I needed something that I could say at the end. So in my interviews, I say the same thing I say at this point in the interview. I always ask my guests the same common question. And that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you can leave us with today? And, again, great quotes, great things. And so it's very similar to your parting shot, but it's something that we could kind of end the show with and whatever.
Good artists borrow, great artists steal. Picasso said that. He wasn't too shabby. Check out Profiles in Leadership. Just Google Steve Anderson. He's had a track record. He doesn't really have to tell you about what he's done. He can sort of just point to a few things and show you, and show trumps tell every single time. Show is better than tell. So Steve, thanks for doing what you're doing, and thanks for doing it here on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Jimmy. It's always a pleasure, and I enjoy seeing your continued success. So keep on rolling.
Perfect. You ever wonder how those rock star clinicians seem to just know what to do? Like they've got a sixth sense in clinic. Well, here's the secret. Brooks IHL. Their residency and fellowship programs for PTs, OTs, and SLPs are where clinical skills meet elite mentorship. We're talking 150 hours of one-on-one mentoring, lab training that's immersive, and real-world experience inside Brooks Rehabilitation's top-tier system of care. And unlike some programs where you have to put your career on pause, Brooks IHL pays you a full salary while you level up. Their grads consistently outperform national board pass rates, and most of their mentors, they've been through the program themselves. If you're serious about being a clinical expert, this is the move. Go to brooksihl.org and check out all 10 program tracks. The next level of your career is waiting at Brooks.